Good morning. My name is Sarah Hotellin, Miss Hotellin, but my students call me Miss H. I am a high school drama teacher, and I want to talk to you today about quitting and not quitting. I brought with me today some knitting needles. I hope to talk to you about education, educators, and my own story as a teacher, and I hope the knitting needles will make sense at the end. We are currently facing and dealing with, daily, a nationwide teacher shortage. Every single day, teachers walk off the job. Those left behind are overworked, underpaid, and exhausted. Recently, I almost became one of those that left. I got to a real breaking point at my job. I cried in my classroom almost every day. And one day, I very nearly picked up the phone to call security to come and watch my class so I could just go home. It was a Monday, and we have shorter classes on Mondays. I had a special lesson planned, one I spent quite a bit of time and energy on, and this class completely just derailed and dismantled that plan in 5 minutes. I found myself completely unprepared and had lost control over the class. I was so tired of trying to hold it together. Every day, I wanted to leave my keys and badge on my desk and never come back. The timing of being asked to do this talk is mildly humorous. How to talk about not quitting when my feelings on that topic change daily and sometimes even hourly. But I think I was asked to talk about education because I think I've always been seen as a dedicated, talented, and effective teacher. It is who I am. Teaching is my identity. I have never done anything else and could never see myself leaving. I am Performing Arts Department Chair. I have spoken at educational conferences. I received a Teacher of the Year award from my peers in 2019, and in February of 2020, my students won Best Ensemble at the District One Act Festival. I loved my job. I was good at it. So what happened? How did I turn into the weeping mess that just no longer cared? I'd like to give you some context, some history, a trip down memory lane, if you will. I really had to piece some things together to make sense of everything that's happening to education and to educators right now. Because one of the things that I've learned is I am certainly not alone in how I feel. I will share some things with you that you may already know, but I hope that hearing them from me helps to illustrate the world that teachers are living in and why so many have left for good. Let's briefly revisit April of 2018, the nationwide teacher walkouts. That was an incredibly emotional time, and it felt like we accomplished so much. This was my son at his first protest. He came to the Capitol with me on one of the days, and his message remains important. Plus, he was just really cute, and I wanted to share this picture. Teachers were no longer martyring themselves for the good of the kids. We were standing up and shouting to anyone that would listen. Taking care of the teachers is for the good of the kids. We were bringing attention to neglected facilities, staff shortages, and poverty wages. We were telling our stories. And our communities rallied around us in support. The 2 years that followed were filled with activism and what felt like progress. 2 years. So that would bring me to March of 2020. Remember that teacher I was talking about? Me, a veteran teacher on top of my game, and it was getting better all of the time. I had just gotten into graduate school, a master's in theater with a summer residency in Ashland, Oregon, the home of the famous Oregon Shakespeare Festival. My students and I had been working for months on our own Shakespearean production. The Tempest was set to open in just 2 weeks. We left for spring break, daunted by the to-do list we still had ahead of us, but we were excited for what was coming. And then you know what happened. The set and costumes we were working on remained exactly where we left them, untouched for an entire year. I returned to my empty classroom and theater a year later and began the cleanup alone, haunted by the ghosts of a lost year. Now, this could easily just be a COVID story, and it is, but there's more to it. The things that were underneath, the real reasons teachers are in the state they are now in, were just lying in wait. They existed before COVID. COVID just became the perfect environment for those elements to thrive and then explode. COVID certainly shut down my school and my theater department. It closed a beautiful production just 2 weeks from opening. I lost contact with students that I had previously spent 6 hours a day with and had known for years. All of my creative outlets as a performing artist were off limits. But what I really want to talk about is more common, and it touches every teacher. During the walkouts, you might remember this element popping up. This is from 2018, a full 2 years before the schools shut down, but you see where I'm heading. These lines could be from yesterday, honestly. The COVID part of the story is how these 2018 complaints and opinion pieces turned into a nationwide debate and real legislation. For an entire school year, and then some, you could not turn on the news without teachers being villainized, blamed, and dragged through the mud. When we were home, people called us lazy. When we were teaching, they screamed that we were trying to indoctrinate their children and worse, and that cameras were needed in the classroom in order to protect their children from us. From us. All of the imagery and rhetoric surrounding being a teacher has become toxic and confusing. The storybook image of the kind and selfless teacher, think Miss Frizzle and Matilda's Miss Honey, who nurtures and inspires young minds, has been replaced by a demon. The legislature passed laws to try and force us to do things like post a year of lesson plans in advance so that they could be approved. They wanted to bar us from talking about anything they deemed controversial, like US history. They actively work to keep our districts from creating a safe environment for us. And they steal money that was meant for education. Teachers were suffering in other ways before we returned. We juggled jobs and childcare through the shutdown, just like everyone else. We grieved our losses, and then we bore witness and gave comfort to our students as they grieved theirs. We absorbed all of the sadness and despair and loneliness and just added it to our own. The prospect of returning in person, however dangerous and sketchy the plans were, was a welcome escape from all of the awfulness of the previous school year. Now, surely the attacks on teachers would stop. We would be back in our classrooms at last. Things would slowly return to normal, and I would be able to direct a play again. I know I personally dismissed concerns and overlooked a lot of things to be able to be back in my classroom with my students and in my theater. What happened after the first day of school was nothing like what we were prepared for. Students who had been cooped up in their rooms for a year were now unleashed on a short-staffed campus. Social distancing is not a possibility when there are not enough teachers. Any excitement we had about reopening vanished. Students fought in the hallways. They destroyed school property. They shared challenges to slap a teacher and then post it online. If you are the kind of teacher that is only in it for the kids, this is not your year. Even as we spent every moment of every day trying to nurture their healing hearts and show them that we are on their side and that we want the best for them, desperately trying to reconnect with them, we remained the enemy. And why not? Teachers are the villains in so many stories, and during the shutdown, teachers and schools carried the blame for so much, and we were not there to defend ourselves. It's a little funny, but it's true. In popular entertainment, teachers are the enemy, and these kids hadn't seen a real, live teacher in a year and a half. That is like forever in kid time. This former teacher, R.A. Christine, explains not only why she left the profession, but why she thinks all teachers should leave. And she was making a lot of sense to me. The article is called "Teaching is a Woman: Why I Closed My Classroom Door." It is a beautifully written article, and in it she addresses the question, what about the children? And she talks about the workload, expectations, the micromanagement, and the lack of control teachers have over their lives. She points out the fact that throughout the pandemic and the shutdown, no one really asked teachers, not in a meaningful way, what they thought should happen. So much of it was debated in the media and in the government by people who had never taught or been in a classroom. Now that she has left, she talks of worrying about the mental health of her peers. The teachers will bear the brunt of the blame for learning loss. She says, I worry about the men and women who are reduced to Teacher Appreciation Week and then mocked and ridiculed when a child they didn't birth nor raise doesn't know something. I could quote so much of it, but I could not do her writing the justice it needs. I still have not quit my job. I have not closed my door. It wasn't until a couple of weeks ago that I finally figured out why. Because for a while there, my reasons for not quitting had more to do with a paycheck than with any sort of passion for my craft or hope for the future. And the reason has to do with those knitting needles. Every couple of weeks, I sit with friends and we record a podcast where we discuss short stories. And one of those stories was called The Devil You Know. It involved a man meeting the devil in the street. He knew evil and felt compelled to fight it, but he was alone. No one else seemed to see or pay attention to the evil that he could see so clearly. People just walked by. The devil mocked him. Who would believe you? And what weapons do you have anyway? You see, all he had was a pair of knitting needles. Our conversation about that story was one of my favorites in a long time. We talked about corporate greed, climate change, political corruption, social injustice, and how the man in the story is all of us. We see injustice in the world and we want to fight it, but we feel alone and ill-equipped. We wonder if others see what we are seeing. This is one of the reasons we seek out each other in UU, isn't it? Because we have the drive to make the world a better place, and we know that we need each other to do it. What are the devils that you see? What keeps you active in fighting injustice? When have you wanted to just give up and start being like the people who just walk by, who pay no attention and are focused on only what affects them? It seems so much easier, doesn't it? What keeps you going? On the day that I sat crying in my classroom, pondering how to make a quick escape from my students, the professional development specialist for our school came into my room. It was purely by accident that she walked in at that moment. I just shrugged at her and I told her, I give up. She looked at me and very earnestly and kindly said, it's okay. You are not alone. In that moment, I was seen and understood. I did not leave, and I went back the next day. I was struggling through. I was determined to see it get better. You see, I had spent so much time working in isolation, I started to buy the lie and see myself as a villain. The students were not responding to me. They clearly did not trust me. I felt that I had done something to deserve this. I was not Miss Honey or Miss Frizzle. I was Professor Umbridge. When we read the story about the knitting needles and talked about it, I was reminded of all the good things that we try to do as teachers. We are counselors, coaches, cheerleaders, advisors. We are creative. We are strong and flexible in the face of adversity. We love our students as if they were our own. We feed them and comfort them. We forgive them when they mess up. And we do our best every day to fight off the devils that threaten our students, even if all we have is a set of knitting needles. But the difference between us and that man who met the devil on the street is we are not alone, and the work we do is still important. I admit that sometimes it still feels a little hopeless, that I am completely overworked and exhausted. But it is in isolation that the hopelessness takes over. And we were isolated for so long, it's no wonder I came so close to walking away, to closing my own door. But I am thankful for the reminders that have come my way recently, and that this is not the end, and that I am strong enough. I'm still a teacher. And I am not alone. I have all of you. And look, I brought enough knitting needles for all of us. What makes you want to quit? What devils shall we vanquish today? Thank you.